Trump's corridor, Aliyev's route, Kocharyan's railway, and Karapetyan's jailhouse movement. Everyone is trying to redraw Armenia. So who really is in control?
Hello and welcome to the Armenian News Network, Groong. We will be discussing these topics and more on this Week in Review episode for October 12, 2025. Today we're talking with Hrant Mikaelian, an interdisciplinary researcher in Yerevan. Hello, Hrant. Welcome to the Groong podcast.
Thank you.
Welcome, Hrant. All right, let's begin with the CIS summit in Dushanbe. The Commonwealth of Independent States, formerly Soviet states essentially, held its summit in Dushanbe on October 10. Some minor outcomes: the Turkmenistan assumed the 2026 chairmanship, CIS Plus format was approved, and SCO was admitted as an observer into that CIS Plus format. A number of border security, counterterrorism, military cooperation agreements were signed or extended until 2030. And also energy deals, trade deals, and transport, humanitarian issues, and digitalization agreements were also discussed. Pashinyan attended, and he tried to sell the CIS on the TRIPP, the Trump route, as a means of achieving peace and prosperity in the South Caucasus and what he terms as achievements from the August 8th meeting at the White House. As a result, Pashinyan said that the South Caucasus would unlock all transportation in Central Asia and so on. Can you tell us what you see as the main outcome of the CIS summit? What was the reaction about TRIPP from CIS members? And I mean, we saw that episode between Pashinyan and Putin when Putin tried to quiz Pashinyan on the trade volume between Armenia and Russia, and it was pretty embarrassing to watch that. But I want to take your opinion on the whole summit.
Well, I will start from the last point. I mean, the difference between statistical measures of different countries, even regarding the same issue, I mean, the mutual trade, is frequently occurring. So it's not a big deal, frankly speaking. But what was obvious that Putin was trying to portray Armenian-Russian relations as bigger, and Pashinyan was trying to portray it as smaller scale relations, which implies that Putin wants to deepen these relations and Pashinyan wants to decrease their size. And that's obvious also from other statements. That's just one small episode which shows the direction of the politics. Now, apart from that, basically, CIS countries, namely Russia and Belarus first, they are approaching this trip as something they could not, they don't like, but they cannot stop. So at this time, they just perceive it as purely informational thing. So okay, this happens. We don't like it. We don't intervene. At least until the end of the Ukrainian war, Russia won't intervene in South Caucasus affairs. That's what I can see from Russian media and political narrative and from statements of their experts. So as of now, I think Russia is, on the side of narrative is negative towards this project, but on the action side, it's neutral.
Hrant, in 2018, this whole saga, Armenia's saga started. Well, it really started in 2018 May, I would say. But in later that year, they also had the Dushanbe agreement, and there was this famous meeting between Pashinyan and Aliyev in an elevator, and that was the first tete-a-tete meeting between the two, at least recorded by journalists, and some serious agreements between Pashinyan and Aliyev were reached, so that in order to allow Pashinyan to consolidate power at home and not to shoot on the borders, and then until the 2020 war started. I wonder what you thought about the meeting between Pashinyan and Aliyev this time in Dushanbe.
Okay, first of all, they have met again and again for a very short period of time, just to show that they are in very close relationship, at least with each other. So that's first thing. Second, regarding the 2018 meeting, I think what is very important to highlight as of today is that by that time they already had a deep negotiating track, as Azerbaijan published just before the war through Arsen Kharatyan, and they have agreed on the principles of further politics before this meeting. This meeting was a mean to formalize or to present the new policy by Pashinyan. And this policy was rejection of the older policy, which implied guarantees. And now, starting from guarantees between Armenia and Azerbaijan and Artsakh, which were fixed in St. Petersburg, Geneva, and Vienna, switching to Dushanbe agreements, which were just purely between the sides.
Yeah.
So first he removed the mediators and he removed guarantees and opened the way to the war, which is similar to the current situation. He says, if we don't do anything, Azerbaijan won't do anything as well. So in reality, there is a process of diplomatic, political, and military disarmament of Armenia, which was highlighted in 2018, and I think the parallel here just can be drawn to the way that in reality the same process is ongoing, but on another level. And what is also important, why both Pashinyan and Aliyev, who were blaming Russia for everything bad possible, came to Dushanbe and had great meetings with Putin. It's very important because by that time they needed to show to the West that they are against Russia to have that meeting in Washington. Now, since they had it, they can try to restore relations with Russia partially. And since Russian diplomacy is, very poorly at planning, they just perceive it as the change in policy, which in reality not change in policy, but change in current approach.
So, and for those who are interested, we talked more about the infamous Dushanbe elevator meeting 2 weeks ago when we talked about the 2020 war. And to add some more context around when you said Vienna and St. Petersburg, you mean the agreements to establish monitoring mechanisms across the entire contact line, right? Something that was on the table after the 2016 war that Armenia fought hard to achieve diplomatically, and Pashinyan essentially negotiated away based on his trust of Aliyev and saying that, or whatever, his assurances that Aliyev won't shoot.
Yeah, and what is most important here, it's a change of the logic of negotiations. So in case of that agreements, we had guarantees of peace, or we were working at guarantees of peace, and now it's just trust between Pashinyan and Aliyev, which we have seen how it worked. And basically we are heading in the same direction right now.
One of the key outcomes of the CIS was a meeting between Putin and Ilham Aliyev, as a matter of fact, Hrant. Since December 2024, Russian-Azerbaijani relations have deteriorated significantly, and that is following the Azal flight crash. At the time, Putin had given a general apology and proposed compensation to Azerbaijan, but Aliyev, for some reason, didn't accept that and wanted more. Relations having reached a nadir, this meeting was clearly an opportunity for Putin to further reach out with an olive branch and for Aliyev to hear what he needed to hear in order to turn the corner in relations with Russia. Putin explained how the crash happened and reiterated Russia's responsibility for the crash. And so the Azeri media, amplified by the Western media, were quick to ascribe full diplomatic victory to Aliyev for the so-called apology. And reportedly, interstate relations have started to thaw at this point in time. As a matter of fact, Hikmet Hajiev, a foreign policy assistant to Aliyev, said Azerbaijan accepts Russia's explanations, and he hopes legal pressures on Azeri workers in Russia will begin to cease. Had relations between the countries sunk so low that it was no longer comfortable for them? Who needed this meeting more? Was it Putin or was it Aliyev?
I think this is a case where when it was beneficial for both sides, and both sides wanted this to happen. And the reason behind it is that, yes, in reality, the relations went too low, but both sides had, own rational for hitting that low. So Azerbaijan had to restore relations with the West because after ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, United States and partially European Union have decreased factual level of relations with Azerbaijan, and Azerbaijan was in half diplomatic blockade, especially Aliyev himself. So he saw Trump as an opportunity to break through this diplomatic blockade, because first, Trump does not care about anything, and second, because he does not know about anything. He just needs a good photo, which Aliyev was ready to provide. That's first thing. Second thing, Aliyev knew that the West has interests in providing, especially Anglo-American side, in providing EU with Central Asian resources, and they presented, Azerbaijan and Turkey have presented so-called Zangezur Corridor as a mean to realize that. So, I mean, the Turkish-Azerbaijani narrative about the corridor is one thing, but the way they present it to Russians, to Chinese, and to the West is completely different. And those three narratives are completely different as well. And the way it is presented in Armenia is also a completely different thing. But in reality, he wanted to have this corridor and to have somehow approved it. And while Pashinyan says it is not a corridor, we understand that for most of claims which are made on Trump's side, on Aliyev's side, and even on Pashinyan's side, it is a corridor and even extraterritorial one. So Aliyev got what he wanted from the United States, and for that he needed, for improvement of relations with the West, he needed to spoil relations with Russia for some time to show that he is anti-Russian. So he is one to whom they should work. And then after he had this meeting in Washington, he could start slowly and gradually improving relations with Russia. That's what he is doing. Now, Russians were completely reactive at that point because they have seen Azerbaijan is, pushing hard for apologies. Now, Russian approach is a bit different. Russia was responsive, and when they saw that Azerbaijan is starting demanding apologies, which Russia is not very good at, they just started hitting back and pushing on, pressuring Azerbaijani pro-Aliyev business people in Moscow and in other cities of Russia. So they started decreasing Azerbaijan's influence and hitting Azerbaijani incomes, which are pretty big from Russia in reality. It's not only oil, there are lots of things which are connected to Russia, and there is hard cash as well. So they have hit Azerbaijani cash flow as well. And by the way, that hit was permanent in many cases. So Azerbaijan needed to improve that, but Russians also, because confronting Azerbaijan means confronting Turkey, confronting Israel, and to some extent even the West. So they needed to avoid the real conflict with Azerbaijan. And Putin is very pragmatic here. I mean, Putin on his side does not look very much on how things look. It does not look good because Russia is much, much stronger than Azerbaijan. But for Putin, the apology is not very expensive. So ultimately, he decided that if we are able to improve relations, and by the way, the first signal came from Aliyev because he congratulated Putin with his birthday. So he decided to, the apology is not very expensive. Let's do it and get back to this issue again after the end of the Ukrainian war.
Hrant, you said that there were disagreements at the CIS meeting between Putin and Pashinyan about the state of trade relations between the two countries. Is there a parallel between the kind of pressure that Russia has put on Azeri workers and now maybe some of the Armenian truckers are experiencing difficulties because of so-called immigration laws and overstaying, let's say, 90 days in the country? Do these problems that the truckers are having reflect the problems with the relations between Russia and Armenia?
I would look at it from two sides. First is internal Russia's change, and second is Russian-Armenian relation. Now, on the background of, this Russian-Ukrainian war, we see that anti-migrant sentiments in Russia are increasing. So the war is somehow democratizing Russia because when the civilians And when the civil society and businesses are paying a war tax, be it just through draft or through increased budget pressure or something else, the state has to be more responsive towards low-level demand. Anti-migrant sentiments in Russia have been present since 90s, but the authoritarian Russian state would not listen to those. And now it became more responsive. We see that this extent of migration from the south in Russia is as big as in the European Union. The difference is in approach of the state. In Russia, migrants do not receive social benefits. But anyway, anti-migrant sentiment has started affecting the policy. And we see the parallel between Russia and Europe here is rather apparent. So anti-migrant laws or laws limiting or hardening migration are being imposed lately rather frequently. Every other month you see some new law or some new regulation in Russia. So it is to the big extent it's a continuation of internal development in Russia. But of course, those that are targeting especially Armenians, I think that could be connected to the politics as well. So the pressure towards Armenians is not as big as towards Azerbaijanis, because unless Armenia is leaving EU, the pressure will be very limited.
You mean the
But,
EAEU, the Eurasian Economic Union?
Yeah, Eurasian Economic Union. But at the same time, Russian experts are already discussing that if Armenia continues deepening relations with the West, they might force Armenia to make a choice between EU and EU. So ultimately, Armenia might have to make a choice. But unless it happened, Russian, pressure on Armenian businesses, workers, and so on will be limited in scope, but it might occur, and sometimes it does.
Hrant, days before the CIS summit, actually from October 6 to 7, many of the same leaders were in Gabala, Azerbaijan, for the 12th summit of the Organization of Turkic States. I think it's important to highlight that this organization driven by Turkey is trying to unify all the Turkic-speaking states, and it's not just language, it's not just culture. They're talking about military cooperation. So the OTS plus format was adopted, and Turkmenistan was given observer status. They, had essentially almost parallel to what CIS did, and they also affirmed solidarity with the Turkish Cypriot people, including Northern Cyprus as part of the OTS plus, and so on and so forth. But of note, I think, was that during this OTS summit, Aliyev spoke much more freely about the so-called Zangezur Corridor. He pushed the term corridor. At the summit in Dushanbe, it didn't seem like that he was pushing that term that much. But I wanted to get your thought why Aliyev chose this difference in tactics in terms of how to present it.
First of all, I think summit in Gabala was much bigger and deeper than summit in Dushanbe. And I think the Turkish states are deepening their integration very quickly. And I want to highlight the difference between the approach of Central Asian states and Turkey plus Azerbaijan in this matter, because for the states of Central Asia, basically the relations with Turkey is more or less the same thing as for Georgia, Ukraine, Armenia, or Moldova was the European integration. So they want new technologies, they want economic improvements, they want new markets. That's what they want. Now, what Turkey is really bringing there is a war. Basically the same which European integration brought to these four countries which I meant. Well, first, Moldova has skipped the war yet, but it is approaching. The rest got the war. Now there, I'm afraid Turkey is bringing the war as well. Why am I saying that? Lately, we have heard how Pashinyan said that the Mehri corridor will be used to supply weapons as well. So he himself said that. which means Turkey is already planning to supply weapons to the Central Asian states and then create conflicts there, including the conflict between Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and conflict between Kazakhstan and Russia. That's what Turkey is planning to do. Now, that's one important story. Another important story is that if we look at public opinion in Central Asian states, we will see that in many Central Asian states, people perceive Turkish influence as unwanted. So it's more than they would like to see it. But at the same time, Turkey is very consistent with its diplomacy, with its policy, with its economic presence, and furtherly military presence, while the other sides, including China and Russia, are much more passive. So even though there is no initiative on the side of Central Asian states, the initiative always comes from Ankara. Again, we see still the integration is deepening and deepening. Again, very similar to the so-called European integration, which, on the contrary to the Western narrative, the initiative always came from Brussels and Washington, not from Kiev or Tbilisi, or especially Yerevan or Chisinau. So now, again, this has a geopolitical dimension, and we have seen how Uzbekistan has joined the so-called Shushi Declaration, which is effectively a basis for creation of a unitary Turan state. And that's one thing. Another thing, they are discussing the new joint Turkic alphabet. So again, the creation of one nation. Not
well,
all of them are
Hrant, I believe they're adopting the Latin alphabet for the Turkish language to be used, correct?
Well, frankly speaking, I don't know exactly how it will end, but at least they want to unify it across all the countries.
That's right.
Now, Kazakhstan is not very welcoming this initiative. But again, with the dedication Turkey has, it might happen sooner or later. So it's not, again, being done by Central Asian countries, but they are, the object of this policy, not the subject in reality. Another thing which is important is that now Turkey is releasing some regulations towards these countries. So at the same time, when Russia is hardening immigration from Central Asian states, Turkey is easing it. So Turkey has declared that it will treat foreigners from Azerbaijan and Turkic countries of Central Asia as locals, not foreigners. I don't understand yet how it will implement on the judicial level, but at least this is a political statement which we have for now. So as of now, we see that deepening relations between Central Asian countries and Turkey is very quick. And on the CIS summit, on the contrary, nothing real happened. Just pure declaration, negotiations, and just joint photo, nothing else. So I think Turkish Council is as of now much more united organization than at least CIS, not to say about CSTO or even Eurasian Economic Union.
Okay, let's come to the Armenian domestic scene for a change. As Armenia moves closer to the 2026 parliamentary elections, domestic politics are becoming more active and competitive. Former President Robert Kocharyan held a 3-hour press conference signaling Hayastan Alliance's intention to focus on the elections as the key political event of 2026. Arman Tatoyan, former HR ombudsman of Armenia, also is entering politics. His movement is called Wings of Unity. And according to politician Suren Surenyan's, Prosperous Armenia, headed by Gagik Tsarukyan, will also participate in the 2026 elections in partnership with Surenyan's Democratic Alternative Party. Billionaire businessman Samvel Karapetyan's civic movement, In Our Way, MerDzevov, drew attention with a major rally in Yerevan. And in Vaghar-Shabad, the city where Echmiadzin, the seat of the Mother See, is located, local elections are set to test the national mood. 9 parties are fielding candidates, including the ARF Dashnaktsutyun, Mair Hayastan, that's Mother Armenia, that's not Hayastan Dashing, and Artur Vanetzian's Homeland Party. So many observers see this race as an early indicator of the dynamics that could shape 2026.
So can I suggest that we talk about In Our Way or MerDzevov? So from his jail cell, businessman Samvel Karapetyan has launched a new political movement called In Our Way, which recently held a large rally in Yerevan. The event drew wide attention, featuring a video address from Nobel Prize-winning economist Daron Acemoglu, who voiced support for the movement's call for political and economic change in Armenia. The rally underscored growing discontent with Nikol Pashinyan's government and signaled the emergence of a new opposition force that could shape the landscape in 2026. It's worth noting that In Our Way is not yet registered as a political party, though Narek Karapetyan has promised to do so by the end of 2025 or early 2026 before the elections. So they are clearly intending to participate. Hrant, what are your impressions on the movement so far and the entry of Samvel Karapetyan into politics in general?
Okay, so in the beginning, this movement has drawn many hopes in the society, and at some point, by the end of August, the hopes were as high that it got at least the intention to vote, which we can see from the polls, opinion polls. It very quickly overpassed Kocharyan's Armenian bloc and even got more support than Kocharyan bloc ever had, even joined with the Republican Party. So currently, parliamentary parties have less support. No, they ever had less support than Samvel Karapetyan's party has. But at the same time, now they have, somehow stopped growing because they already gathered most of discontent opposition supporters who have switched to support this party. And even some of the possible voters came back to Kocharyan because their beginning was much more, promising than what they are doing now, frankly speaking. What I mean specifically, first of all, Samvel Karapetyan is being jailed. And though, according to the polls, majority or at least half of the population thinks he is unlawfully in jail, so he should be released free. And having for any cause, having 50% support of the overall population is enough to do whatever you want. I mean, at least they could gather thousands, many thousands in the streets to force authorities to let him free. I think the main benchmark of the success of this party is not having some rallies or some celebrations in Yerevan or Gyumri, but letting Samvel Karapetyan free. As of now, they are failing, which is one and very important thing. Second, I think they are very strong in economic promises, and they are working on that, and we see some results, and they are touching some important issues for the population. But at the same time, what we can see is that they lack, political consistency. That's understandable because this party comes from business, but you can't win elections only with economic promises. You need to fill the gap with politics, especially in foreign politics, because Pashinyan, even though it is his weakest point, he is pushing on foreign political narrative and he is trying to dominate that. And, this party also has to do that. It's very important to do that. Unless they do that, they cannot win. So we will see how they will develop. But at the same time, I can say that as of now, again, they are a major opposition party, and they have good chances of success. Why? Because if we look what Samvel Karapetyan says and what he was caught for, that's beyond neutral speaking. I mean, he was caught for very innocent criticism of Pashinyan's government. So Pashinyan sees a threat from him, and it's very understandable because in a democratic atmosphere in Armenia, Pashinyan would lose to Samvel Karapetyan. So he tries to utilize some authoritarian methods to keep the power. And even moreover, Pashinyan said that he expressed his fears or just spread the propaganda that if opposition wins, they will kill all of us. That's what he said some months ago. So in this atmosphere, you cannot have democratic elections if the government says that they will kill us. So, and maybe this expressed his own will what we see, he is oppressing any opposition movement which is there. So as of now, we have very many political prisoners, including 2 archbishops, a major opposition representative, and a major business person in Armenian world, I mean Samvel Karapetyan, and many other political activists and players. So by authoritarian methods, authorities are trying to not let this party grow. But again, this party has enough tools, at least financial tools, to utilize it and also to play this game and gain more support. So as of now, they have had a good start. Now they have somehow stuck, and we will see how it will develop. Now, going to the other parties, I think that yes, the situation is developing, and it's interesting that Arman Tatoyan's new party has gained more support or more interest than I was expecting. So it might even try to get into the parliament, which will be interesting change if they get. But if they won't, then it will mean just that they are, taking some opposition votes, and that Pashinyan will get more seats in the parliament. So it depends how successful they will be. And regarding Gagik Tsarukyan, according to any poll we have seen lately, he has very big chances of getting into the parliament. So as of now, it's more or less guaranteed. So as of now, it seems that the parliament will have 4 factions, which will be the Pashinyan's faction, then Samvel Karapetyan's faction, then Armenia bloc, Kocharyan's Armenia bloc, and Gagik Tsarukyan's party. Whoever will be the next, I don't know. But if so, then there is another question, whether opposition parties will form a coalition, formal or informal, or if they will gather the majority, which is possible. But as of now, the landscape we are observing is that as of now, Pashinyan and the authorities have more or less the same number of possible votes as the opposition.
Hrant, many observers believe that a single unifying figure, as you mentioned, is crucial for unifying all of these various opposition parties. Who can play such a role in the current landscape? Can Samvel Karapetyan actually play that role?
Whether he can or cannot depends on his party and himself, but technically it can only be him. I mean, if anybody can, it can be him. But whether he is capable of that, we will see. Because first thing he needs to do, he needs to get out of jail.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's a crucial thing. Another issue that we are thinking about is how the Republican Party will meet all of these challenges, because they are still, leaning on the whole impeachment route, which I'm not sure where they are, but at least the highest Tashing has signed on board. But where's the momentum? Is that really going to be a real way of proceeding forward?
Frankly speaking, Republican Party this year has lost its ground to a big extent, because in the beginning of the year, they have been slowly but steadily improving their position, improving the overall impression of the party in the eyes of voters, and increasing their level of public support and intention of vote. So they were somewhere between 5 and 7%, and even with potential of further growing. I would not say up to 10, but maybe up to 8.5% or something. But then they got stuck into mutual conflict with the Armenia bloc, with Kocharyan's party, and this time I think they have initiated it. It was very big unfortune for both, because both have lost their support levels. That's the first very important thing, and I would say even more that this whole impeachment process was to big extent the tool to criticize the Armenia bloc, which I think was rather unhealthy, because I mean, they were saying that, okay, we are starting impeachment, what do you do? And the whole narrative was more or less this. And I think in the situation where opposition has no real chances, at least before Samvel Karapetyan, to win the election, starting this internal conflict between the 2 major factions, I think that was rather unhealthy on both sides. And as of now, according to the polls, Republican Party has lost lots of its support for other parties, including Samvel Karapetyan and possibly even possibly even Arman Tatoyan's, this Wings of Unity party. So what will happen next, I don't know. But I think the Republican Party has to struggle to get back its votes if they are capable of.
Well, Hrant, you're saying that they have lost some of their votes, but the reality is that all three parties in parliament have lost a lot of their votes because the polls show that the undecided vote, that cannot say what I will do vote, is over 60%. Two-thirds of the people out there just do not know who they would vote for, or they would not vote, or they would not participate.
Okay, but let's look how it will distribute in the end. Well, at least half of those who are undecided will not vote. So we exclude them because if they are politically passive, it means that it doesn't matter what do they think. That's the reality of the election. Second half will decide to whom they will vote in the last 3 months before the voting day. So how will they decide? There are two ways of distribution. One, they will distribute the same way as the other, those who are decided, and the other that they will join one or another party, which will show the most success in or the most intense pre-election campaign, which last time Pashinyan was very capable of because he was very aggressive, very quick, and by the way, he had a rather big support from the outside world, including from Aliyev, because Aliyev released 15 hostages just before the election, so Pashinyan got several additional percentages. And now, by the way, we have rather similar situation. First, Pashinyan will have a meeting of European political community on the May 4, 2026. So many European leaders will arrive just before the elections, and Pashinyan will describe this as his political success. And basically, I want to say it clearly, those political leaders are going to participate in Pashinyan's pre-election campaign, which is very intended on Brussels side. On the other hand, Aliyev is trying to also renegotiate some things, and Pashinyan asks to return several hostages, let's say non-political hostages, and this is a negotiation track right now, and maybe they will release them. So Pashinyan will say, look, we have new hostages back. So that's another thing. So they will leave Artsak's political leadership in jail, in Baku's jail, but the others, they will try to get them free. And on the other hand, Russia has already declared that it won't in any way interfere in Armenian elections, and it won't support any opposition party. So as of now, we see the more or less the same foreign situation regarding these elections, which is important. On the other hand, let's look at internal landscape. How will those votes distribute? So I think these events, which I have already mentioned, they might affect the vote, but it will also largely depend on how the opposition will draw their campaign. What suggestions do they have? What the program do they have? How quick, responsive, and effective will they be? As of now, it's very unclear. So as of now, the outcome of election is unclear, and both sides can win. But definitely, we see that the West support is towards Pashinyan, and Russia has declared to be neutral. By the way, Russia's decision might change if Ukrainian war is over beforehand.
Hrant, last question for today. I want to draw your attention to the Kocharyan press conference. It was a 3-hour conference we talked about, we mentioned already. And in my opinion, most of what he talked about was not new. He talked about big strategic projects that Armenia requires in order to prosper. And similar to everyone else, we should mention that the Samvel Karapetyan's movement, not a single word about Artsakh, the right of return, and so forth. And the same was with Robert Kocharyan's press conference. But one thing struck out from the conference. Kocharyan argued that he was against, of course, TRIPP, but he argued that pitching a short route to Trump is the wrong approach, and Armenia gains nothing from it. He said that since Trump favors big projects, he said Armenia should propose a larger U.S. project in the region, a strategic package built on 3 railways. So The existing TRIPP is basically east-west through Syunik. Now he's proposing Yeras Julfa Iran, which is north-south, and that would actually drastically reduce time between Yerevan and South Armenia. And he's also proposing Ijevan, Azerbaijan, Russia, which would allow Armenians easy access to Russian markets. And only under the condition of full Armenian sovereignty and matched by reciprocal openings from all sides. He seems to think that Trump's ego may permit this change of rules by Armenia, but also Kocharyan admitted that Azerbaijan may reject this plan, but then the diplomatic essentially advantage would be on Armenia's side. What are your impressions of this argument and perspective laid out by Kocharyan?
First, I want to speak about, excluding Artsakh from narrative of opposition. There are two sides. One is that it's a very big trauma for the society and people don't want to speak about it because it's very traumatic, and the way it was presented and the way it was constructed, the whole narrative, it's very traumatic, and Pashinyan has already won this narrative war and opposition is joining it. So that's on one hand, and opposition is trying, not to speak on this not very popular topic. But not very popular does not mean that people don't want to listen to it. I would say that some people don't want to listen to it. And another issue is with the opposition itself. I mean, opposition is always playing in the frame of narrative of Pashinyan. This is why opposition is always losing. And the same way Kocharyan did this time. I mean, yeah, Pashinyan is discussing the corridor. Let's come up with a better corridor. On one hand, yeah, Armenia could, in this stage, which is bad position, but could try to redraw somehow this negotiation table and have these, propositions which you have mentioned. That theoretically is possible. But on another hand, it is, as of this time, unrealistic because we fell very low and getting back will be very hard. But yes, technically, this could be as a platform for redrawing the negotiations because as of now, it's a real so-called Zangezur Corridor, what they are doing. I mean, yes, Pashinyan says it's not corridor, it is corridor. And it is extraterritorial corridor. And even worse, Trump has demanded and Pashinyan has proposed the 99-year rent for USA of this piece of the strategically most important territory of Armenia to the US. 99 years with possible extension of another 99 years. So with 35 years or 34 years of independence, Armenia is giving up a territory for basically 198 years to the US. I mean, Pashinyan is just giving the territory. Do we understand that? Getting back from this situation, when you have agreed to give the most strategic territory which you have to other forces, I mean, that will be extremely hard, and this should be a main goal of the new or the next authorities, but to which extent it is possible and how it should be done, that's another issue. But I would rather prefer if the opposition speaks more of its own narrative and constructs its own narrative. Yet I don't see that.
I agree with both of you that Armenian society has PTSD with the issue of Artsakh and is trying to kind of not talk about it. But I just want to note really quickly that I saw a recent interview with Hayastan Dashink, Member of Parliament Anna Grigoryan, and she said that the issue of Artsakh, of course, it is a difficult one, but it cannot be excluded from their platform. And so I think they will be mentioning that during the elections. At least that's what I heard. Okay. Yeah, we'll see. Let's wrap up our topics here. We're out of time. I'd like to ask each of you if there's something on your mind that you would like to share with our listeners. Let's go with you first, Hovik.
Okay. Well, if anyone in the Trump administration is listening to me, listen up. So Trump, your TRIPP corridor is so tiny. Don't sell yourself short. Look on the map. TRIPP across Syunik is just like 42 kilometers. If you look at a large map of the region, that's like 3 inches. You can do better. And the Yeras Julfa line suggested by Robert Kocharyan clocks in at around 120 kilometers. Now that's 3 times longer, like it's this long. So, Mr. Trump, don't put your gold letters on a 3-inch project and call it history. You go 9 inches. The 3-inch link dribbles. The 9-inch route delivers a mother load of cargo, votes, and geopolitical stability. And on top of that, Armenia must keep its sovereignty. Everything should be reciprocal. That's the rule. Everyone will be happy. It'll be the most beautiful and grand, beautiful trip ever. So come on, Trump. You know that's how it's going to be. So which headline do you want? Trump route 3 inches or Trump route 9 inches? Your call.
Okay. Hrant, what's on your mind?
Well, I will continue Hovik's story. Basically, Azerbaijan and Turkey first proposed to Russia to be the moderator of the process. Then, using the West's approach towards Russia, they were able to exclude Russia from it. I'm more than sure that in a couple of years, Azerbaijan and Turkey will do their best to exclude US from the deal as well. I'm very sure about it. So I want US to understand that in reality, they should not play Turkish and Azerbaijani games, however they present it, and they should, look deeper into this situation in this region, and they should look deeper into the interests of Turkey and Azerbaijan and Armenia and other players, and try to understand to which extent it really fits in their interests.
All right. Thank you, Hrant. Thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Take care.
That was our weekend review recorded on October 14, 2025. And we've been talking with Hrant Mikaelian, who is a political scientist and multidisciplinary researcher in social sciences based in Yerevan. He's also a senior researcher at the Caucasus Institute.
Folks, don't forget, like, share, comment. Help us get a few more votes and help us reach a bigger audience. Make a point of sharing this episode with someone you have never shared and inviting them to subscribe to our show. Thank you very much for your support in advance. And I'm Hovik Manucharyan in rainy Glendale right now.
And I'm Asbed Bedrossian in the same rainy Glendale. We'll talk to you next week.
Take care.